welcome to Presenting with Impact. My name is Sam Byers and I'm a researcher developer within researcher development here at Cambridge. I focus on training life science graduates because life science is my background. I did a PhD in molecular endocrinology, followed by 2 postdocs again in molecular endocrinology. During my time as a researcher, I gained an awful lot of experience presenting, such as presenting at conferences, presenting at departmental meetings, presenting lectures, as well as getting some experience in presenting those dreaded lightning talks and 5-minute presentations. The aim of this presentation, I was going to say workshop there, excuse me, the aim of this presentation is to give you an insight on how we can increase the impact of the presentations that we're delivering, whether that be a PowerPoint presentation such as this or a poster presentation. So if everybody's ready, we shall begin. I'd like you to pause and just think about this question for a couple of minutes. What is the importance of delivering a presentation with impact? So a couple of minutes just to jot some ideas down to this question. Off you go. Okay, so I'm sure that you've got an awful lot of answers on a piece of paper, or perhaps you've kept them in your head. Absolutely fine. Let's just try and summarise some of those answers. So it's important for us as researchers to ensure that our presentations have impact because it helps to develop our audience's understanding of the work that we're doing. This in turn can stimulate conversations and provide feedback, which can be really useful, particularly if we're at the beginning of a research project. We may get feedback from other researchers who perhaps have expertise in different methodologies, which could help us expand and drive our research project forward. Presentations and delivering them with impact can also increase our network of people that we have surrounding us within our research, and it also gets people interested in our work, which is never a bad thing. As well as this, presenting with impact and getting your message across effectively and concisely can help build your reputation as an effective researcher. This again can have numerous benefits such as future job prospects, getting grant applications submitted with referee support, as well as when you come to submit your papers for peer review, people will know who you are. So there are an awful lot of reasons as to why we need to take that time just to make sure that our presentation is going to have the impact that we want it to when we're delivering it. What's the first thing that we notice about a presentation? I'm a bit of a mind reader here. I can hear you all thinking presentation title, and you'd be right. There are 3 ways in which we can write a presentation title, okay, and we're just going to go through each of these now. There's the what title. An example of this is engineering reduced population sizes of the malaria carrying mosquito Anopheles. Okay, a what title is a common title that we would be familiar with. It's a title that we generally see at conferences because when we're presenting at conferences we present our work, which is very specialised, but we might be presenting that to a broader research community. For example, I used to deliver presentations on the pituitary at endocrinology conferences, and endocrinology can involve bone metabolism, cancer, reproduction, diabetes, etc. So having a what title really draws the audience in because it's telling them what you are doing. If perhaps you are presenting at a more technical conference or you're perhaps delivering a technical lecture, having a how title might be more appealing to your audience. An example of this is sterile insect release reduces population sizes of the Anopheles mosquito. Perhaps if we were presenting to a more general audience, perhaps where the scientific knowledge or background isn't that of an expert, I'm thinking public engagement conferences here, perhaps public seminars, etc. We might want to use a why title. Okay, and an example of a why title is fighting malaria through biological insect control. So having a why title for these types of presentations helps you to give the audience something tangible that they're perhaps familiar with. So malaria, for example, that's something that within a general population people will understand what malaria is, and you're linking it to your work. Okay, so this is the first activity that I would like you to do. like you to get a pen and a piece of paper or your laptop and take 5-10 minutes to design a what, a how and a why title for your next presentation. Okay? Once you've done that, I'd like you to put your pen and paper down, walk away from your laptop, go and get a cup of coffee, stretch your legs, perhaps check a couple of emails, and then I want you to come back and reread your what, how and why title and see which one has the most impact and is the most attractive. Okay? So if everybody's happy with that, off you go. Okay, I hope you found that exercise useful. It may be that you found it more impactful to perhaps combine a what and a how title, or a what and a why title, or a how and a why title. That's absolutely fine. Sometimes a what and a why title can sound quite similar, and combining them and creating a hybrid title is the way forward in terms of getting people interested in your work. I just strongly suggest that before you submit a title, just take some time, like you've done now, just to have a play around with the different types of titles that you can use and see which one has the most impact, is going to draw people in. Okay, so we've looked at titles and now we're moving on to telling our research story. Ultimately, a presentation, whether it's a PowerPoint or whether it's a poster, is telling a research story. Okay, it's telling your research story. And with every good story, we have a beginning, a middle, and an end. Okay, let's start at the beginning. So, the beginning of our research story, we are thinking about our audience. What do they already know? Okay, so if you're presenting at quite a specific conference, and I'm going to use pituitary here as an example because that's what I used to do. When I was presenting to pituitary experts, I wouldn't need to go into the basics of what the pituitary is, how it functions and the different cell types that you can find within the pituitary, because my audience already knew that. So by thinking about what they already knew, I could then focus on what they needed to know in order for them to come along with me on my research story. Okay? Once we've crafted our beginning to our story, we then move on to the middle. This is where you're going to be presenting your main results, delivering that beautiful data that you've generated. And then at the end of your story, you're going to be summarising how your results have furthered the understanding within your research area and how these results are going to benefit your audience. So our next activity is to think about the skeletal structure of our next presentation. What I'd like you to do is think about the next presentation that you're going to deliver, whether that's an oral or whether that's a poster, and I want you to write 5 sentences to summarise the research story you want to put into that presentation. If everybody's ready, off you go. Again, I hope you found that activity useful, and congratulations, you have the skeletal structure for your next presentation. Okay, I'm just going to quickly focus on PowerPoint slides here. I apologise that I don't have any examples of posters. I haven't been able to get any PDFs to put into this, but if you have any questions about putting a poster presentation together, please feel free to drop me an email, I will give you my email address at the end of this presentation. I'm sure you're all familiar with how to generate beautiful PowerPoint slides, but I just want to go through some key points with you just as a recap. So when we're presenting a methodology, perhaps think about ways in which we can make it more appealing to the audience, okay? Perhaps not like this where it's just bullet points, a step-by-step guide of how that method was carried out. Perhaps think about putting a flow diagram together and using pictures to show how that method that you're presenting was carried out. When we're inserting images, we need to be careful that our images don't go over the top of wording. As you can see in this slide here, the top figure is covering some of the title, which can be slightly off-putting for your audience. Also, if you're going to have a mixture of pictures and bullet points, and the bullet points match the pictures or are related to the pictures, just make sure that all of the images are in line with those bullet points so that people can follow you when you're going through your slide. Try not to clutter slides too much. It may be that you need 2 or maybe 3 introductory slides. That's absolutely fine. But try not to put too much information onto a slide because you're going to lose your audience. As you can see in this slide here, there's an awful lot of information and it doesn't really have a natural flow. It's okay to use pictures, it's okay to use animation in figures, as you can see with the picture on the right. Just make sure that your pictures are inclusive, so red, green, for example. We need to remember that there will be a portion of our audience that have red-green colour blindness, so just make sure that all the colours that you use are inclusive. And also just think about, if you're just going to have pictures on slides, make sure that you guide your audience through that PowerPoint in a nice, easy, slow, step-by-step way so that they can understand what these pictures mean. Obviously we need to have references in our slides if we're presenting work which isn't our own, but references don't need to be the biggest thing on your PowerPoint slide. I would suggest putting them in the bottom left or right hand corner and perhaps have them perhaps font 12, 14. Okay, we need to also make sure that the information that we give in our references on our slides and in our PowerPoint get my words mixed up here. We need to make sure that the references that we give in our PowerPoint presentations and our posters are actually meaningful. Okay, so the author, the year, perhaps a PubMed ID, or the journal and the issue number, for example. Chomsky could have published multiple papers in 2000, 2001, so it would be difficult to find out which paper this slide is referring to. Also, if you're going to have a key, make sure that all of the colours in the key are actually shown on the presentation slide. As you can see, bold red is in the key, but it's not actually in the figure. So this is going to lose your audience. Your audience are going to be playing where's red rather than listening to you go through your slide. It's okay to use different colours to emphasise key points within your presentations. If you're going to be using images, make sure that when they're blown up, when they're on presentation view, for example, people can actually see the words, because if you're imagining a big auditorium, this image here, people right at the back of that auditorium may struggle to actually see some of that wording. And if you're going to use things like strokes through words, through images, just make sure that you explain what that stroke means. For example, in this slide, having a stroke through egg cell, for example, sperm cell, for example, feedback hormones, this means that this part of the pathway has been inhibited. I know that this is something that I would be familiar with from my previous experience as a researcher, but not everybody would be familiar with the way this has been displayed. The other thing that we need to be mindful of is animation. It is okay to have animation, but let's be mindful that too much animation can be a bad thing. I hope I've made my point with this. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about slides. One thing that we have on our slides are titles. Again, we use titles for each of the slides that we have when we're going through a PowerPoint presentation, and we also have the same or a similar thing when we're doing poster presentations. Making the most of slide titles can be really informative to your audience because it can help your audience to understand what they are about to hear and how this relates to what they have heard and how this is going to relate to what they are going to hear. It can also help you as a presenter because they can act as prompts. So perhaps if you stumble a little bit halfway through your presentation, again, whether that's PowerPoint or poster, having those informative slide titles can just act as a reminder to you and get you back on track with delivering an effective and impactful presentation. And just a couple of examples of informative slide titles are, as shown, pulsatile GnRH treatment increases gene expression of CMP, and GCMB mutation, ARG47LU, retains DNA binding ability. Okay, so we're moving on to our third activity. I'd like you to think about the first 3 slides to your next presentation. If your presentation is a poster, I'd like you to think about the first 3 sections of your poster presentation, okay? I'd like you to come up with 3 slide titles or section titles, okay? If you're with somebody, perhaps read these titles to them and get some feedback. Do they make sense? Are they informative? Are they having an impact? If you're on your own, I would suggest that you just put the pen and paper down, perhaps go away, grab a drink, walk around the house, perhaps answer a few emails, and then come back and reread those slide titles and think to yourself, do they make sense? Are they going to have an impact? If everyone's happy with that, off you go. Okay, so we've thought about our main title, we've thought about our story, the beginning, the middle and the end of our story. We've thought about how we're going to perhaps put our PowerPoint slides together. We've thought about our title or section slides. Now we're just going to move on to thinking about our audience, just that little bit more. When we're putting our presentation together, we need to think about the different learning styles that our audience might have. Okay, so when we're putting our presentations together, we need to have in the back of our mind, will my presentation answer the following questions? Why would I want to know this? What is this all about? How will this work for me? And what if I do this? Ultimately, can your presentation clearly convey why these learners should listen to you? So moving on now from our audience, we're going to move on to the presenter, i.e. you yourself, okay? Your poster, your PowerPoint slides, they're all going to have an impact. They're going to help keep your audience engaged, but you as a presenter will also have an impact, okay? So let's go through these. Make sure that when you're presenting you have a purpose. So think about what it is you want to get across in your talk. What is your message and how are you going to deliver that effectively for your audience to understand? Engage with your audience. So think about using gestures, think about eye contact. If looking somebody directly in the eye is a little bit intimidating, pick 3 points at the back of the room and just move your eyes from each of those points. You won't be looking at your audience directly, but you'll certainly be giving the impression that you are engaging with your audience. Think about your use of language as well. Okay, having concise, precise language can help get your message across. Think about your volume as well, using your volume. When you want to perhaps emphasize something, perhaps raise your volume a little bit. Again, you can do this with your pitch. This might be more useful now as some of you may be actually delivering presentations over Zoom, perhaps over Teams, okay, and people might not be able to see you, but they'll be able to see your slides. So altering your volume and your pitch can really engage your audience further and emphasize those main points that you want to get across to make sure that your message comes across clearly. And just think about pace as well. Think about delivering a presentation that is nice and slow so that your audience can. You'll have to excuse me, my little girl is having a tantrum in the background. The joys of being a parent and putting PowerPoints together. Think about your pace. So you want to make sure that you're not speeding through your presentation. It's never good to deliver a 15-minute presentation within 5 minutes. Your audience are not going to be able to keep up with you. So just think about taking a nice, easy pace that helps your audience come along with you on your research story. Remember to breathe naturally as well. Perhaps if you suffer with a little bit of anxiety when it comes to presenting, I certainly do, I still do now. I always get those butterflies and get a little bit anxious before I get up in front of an audience. Just perhaps do some breathing exercises like box breathing. So in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. And do this a few times. It just helps to relax your breathing and get you into a nice breathing pattern, which can help you deliver a nice coherent presentation and stops you from taking unnecessary breaths, perhaps in the middle of sentences, which can sometimes fluster us as presenters. The other thing to bear in mind is having some water. I wouldn't recommend coffee or Coke or anything like that. I would recommend water. Make sure that you have some water nearby. If you're at a lectern in an auditorium, this will be provided with you. Perhaps if you're presenting over Zoom, over Teams, in a more virtual format at the moment, make sure that you've got your water next to you. So if your mouth gets a little bit dry, you can take sips of water, and that'll help you continue your presentation. And don't worry about the length of time that you take to have that sip of water. You might think that it's hours, but honestly, it'll literally be a few seconds and your audience aren't going to notice. The other thing that I would strongly recommend that you do as well is practice. Practice makes perfect, okay? So practice over the phone perhaps with some friends, perhaps do a practice over Zoom, over Teams with your supervisor, perhaps practice it in the bathroom mirror as well. Practice helps you to feel calm and confident about the presentation that you're going to be delivering, and thus increasing the impact of your presentation to your audience. Okay, I hope that you found this session useful. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. My email address is sb2251@cam.ac.uk. All that's left for me to do is wish you all the very best with your future presentations. I'm sure you'll all be wonderful. I look forward to speaking to you all again soon. Take care.